Hi, Lisa Gifford here, and today I'm going to show you a demonstration on making our specialty templates, which is our shark, bass, and mermaid. We're going to mainly focus on the shark, but the construction of these templates are pretty much all the same. It works for all three of them. So here's a couple samples of some of the sharks and the bass and the different ones that I've made. And I've got different styles of cuffs, but here's the cool thing. If you didn't want to have a cuff on these can be made without the cuff like I did with the mermaid here. So we've got sharks, different colorways. I did it in some grunge. I've got different textures for if you want to have the scarf with the little hanger. These are also 3 different ways of doing a cuff. I've actually did this one if you've seen that video of the easiest Christmas stocking video ever. That's what I did with this one. This one here is where I just added it at the end, so you got a little bit of a seam underneath, and this one's where it's got the hidden seam. So there's so many different ways to do cuffs out there. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Here is the bass. It is constructed identical to the shark. It's just I changed out the fabrics and I did some decorative stitching on the fin, and then attaching it here is the same for all of them. And then the mermaid doesn't have the fin, just has the tail. And then just showing some decorative stitches done on it. And what makes it look so good is the foam. So these are our specialty aquatic templates, so we're calling them shark, bass, or fish, or in your mermaid tail. So those are what we're going to focus on. The supplies that you're going to need, of course, is the templates. And I have all 3 of them laid out here. There's only 2 pieces to the mermaid. There's 3 pieces to your shark. There's 3 pieces to your bass. You're going to need your rotary cutters, a pencil, scissors, maybe a ruler. You're going to need your fabrics. You're going to need at least a ½ yard of your main fabric for the body. That's going to be for the, like it's the same fabric that I used for the shark. Now the bass, basically you could do about 1/3 of a yard and maybe a fat quarter to make the 2 pieces here if you want it to be different. You're just going to need a little bit for maybe a fat quarter for if you're going to put a cuff on it. You're going to need about 1/3 of a yard for your lining, and it could be whatever fabric that you want. You could make it really holiday if you want to have a real Christmassy one in there. But I just chose some basic, like a white muslin type fabric. You're going to need fusible foam. I prefer the single-sided fusible foam, not the double-sided. I suppose you could do double-sided. I suppose you could do straight sew-in. But the foam is fused on one side, and on the other side it's not fused. So if you got the double-sided, you could probably fuse it on both sides. I just do the one side, and I'm going to show you how I construct it and make that. It's same here. You're going to use the foam for the tails and the fins. That's the only place that you'll use it. Same here. You only use the foam here. So you don't need a whole lot, just however much that is, because you're only cutting one of these. You might even have some scrap foam that you might have at the house. But it's I'm using, I believe it's the Pellon. They also have a Dorsal, and this is the single-sided fusible foam. So it's got the glue on one side. Then you're going to need, now you don't have to, but I use the fusible fleece, single-sided fusible fleece. And I believe I'm using the heavyweight. I'm sure a midweight or a lightweight would work, or even if you just wanted just a regular thin interfacing or not use it at all. But I do like having the some sort of an interfacing in here because it gives it just a little bit more body. And because of the lining, you're not feeling this on the inside. You got that lining on the inside. But if you didn't want to have the lining at all, I suppose you could just have this in there and this be the lining. But I just use the heavyweight, I think is what I'm using, fleece, and it's on these pieces. It's just on the body pieces of every single one of them. So, and I suppose you're only going to be cutting out 2 pieces of it because you're going to fuse it to the front and the back. So what, about 1/3 of a yard of that too. So those are all the supplies that you're going to need. Just got some extra fabrics here so that you can see there's lots of different fabrics out there that has that scaly look to it, which works well for your mermaid, which works well for your bass. There's so many. Here's one that's not really scales, but I thought was really, really cool. I thought this would be a great fish. It could also be a mermaid. I'm using the fairy frost here. There is some amazing sparkly fairy frost type fabrics out there that really makes the mermaid tails just kind of shine a little bit. And then if you're doing like the bass, I think the bass looks good if you have an accent fabric to coordinate with whatever you're doing for the body. The shark, he's just one solid color, and I use that same piece when I make a little bit of a handle for it that you're going to attach on there. So really easy. These only take, you know, maybe an hour to make. So we're going to go through the whole process and we're going to get started. All right, so I got my fabric laid out here, and like I said, I have about a half a yard here. And it's rather important to pay attention. If you're working with a fabric that has a distinct directional, then it's going to be important on how you're laying out your pieces for your cutting, because you kind of want it to all flow. You don't want a directional going this way and then the tail go in the opposite direction. So this one here, it doesn't matter which direction I have it, it doesn't really have this distinct directional. So I can just lay it out into the best use of how I'd want it to be. But if I needed it to be different, then I would be looking at trying to have my piece, you might need more fabric if I needed this to have that same directional to it. So you're going to cut out 2 pieces of the body of the shark. And if you'll notice, there are some little registration marks here. I mean, these are more of a guide for the placement of your shark fin when you go to be putting that on here. That might change a little bit depending on how wide of a cuff that you're going to be putting on here. So that was on here because you don't want to be putting this up here and then your cuff won't fit. So I had them put these little registration marks sort of as a guide. It's not a set in stone. They don't have to be placed right there. But if you're not doing a cuff at all, you could raise it up a little bit more, but that's what those are. You just kind of pay attention to it when you get it. You're going to be sewing it. That's where your placement of what your shark fin is going to be. So I'm just getting my pieces laid on here, and I'm going to bring this down a little bit, because what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to use this little piece right here, because it's on the fold. I'm going to have that little piece saved aside, and that's going to be used for when I make my loop, for my hanging loop. Then I've got my tail. You're cutting out 2 of the shark fin and 2 of the dorsal and the, I don't know, these are all fins, right? All fins. So the top piece and the bottom piece. So you're going to have 2, 2, and then 2 pieces. So you're gonna, when you go to cut your lining, which this is my lining, you're only gonna cut out 2. So I've already pre-cut the lining. So these are my lining pieces. Just gonna have just 2 pieces here. And then those are the main pieces that you're gonna be cutting with the body. And then then this little glittery piece is if I wanna do a cuff. And then we're gonna cut out go into the, using the fusible fleece and the fusible foam. So I'm just going to go ahead and get this set on here. And again, why we love Martelli templates, because everything stays in place. So I'm going to rotate this around so it's a little bit more user-friendly for me. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut this out. Oh, and just so that you know, here, this piece right here, the tail. So I'm using a 45. A 28 would probably work here, but you're not going to be able to get through this little piece right here. So when you get to where you're cutting out this, you're going to need a pencil. You're going to need to mark that, because you're probably going to be hitting that with some scissors. That's just a little area that's going to be a little bit difficult to cut around. So I got this lined up here, and I want to be sure to save this little piece right here. That's going to be used later on for my I'm just going to go ahead and cut and go all the way down. Pull these sides out. Now this is where I think the 28 works just a little bit better, because I'm going to be going around these little angles right here. I mean, it's not a direct science, because you're going to be sewing completely over this with a zigzag stitch. That's what gives it that little decorative edge there. Oh, and just so that you know, the little registration marks, I had them put them on both sides, because it depends on which side you want to put your fin on. All right, so that is my 2 pieces. So I got that set aside, but you're not done with this. You're going to need it for cutting out your other pieces. Now I'm just going to go ahead and cut through here. And we're going to do this. And we're going to do the dorsal fin. Now I just kind of go around like that because it's going to be taken up in a seam. So now I got my 2 pieces here. I'm going to keep that set aside. Now this is the big piece. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to go ahead and mark, kind of draw that on. Because I know that no rotary cutter is going to work on that very well. These little writings on here is because there's 3 pieces to the shark. So in my storage I have it wrote shark 1 of 2, 2 of, or 1 of 3, 2 of 3, and 3 of 3. That way I can know, hey, there's 3 pieces that goes with the shark template. And that's what's doing it with the little Martelli metallic pencils or pens that we have. Now I'm getting ready to get to that piece right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and cut over across. Because I know I can just do a little bit with the rotary cutter. So I just got this little bit that just has to be trimmed. You could probably, free motion it with the rotary cutter, but I'd grab your scissors and just cut that out. All right. So you're going to repeat that process with your template, and you're going to cut out 2 pieces of your fusible foam. Or excuse me, fusible fleece. You're going to need 2. So you're just going to lay it down, cut 2 out, and then, so that's for your body. Then you're going to do your foam. So you're going to take your 2 pieces, and you're only going to need to cut out 1. I'm going to put this in the best place where I have as little waste as possible. And I'm using a little bit of a larger rotary cutter for this piece. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw my pencil line. And then just go ahead and get this cut out. Now I'm using the 45, but I've actually have used a 60 when I'm cutting the foam because it's just a little bit taller. I'm going to do the exact same thing, just going to come off. Get some of it cut. Alright, then I'm just going to get my scissors and just finish that up on here. You only need 1, and then you're going to need 1 for the dorsal fin. If you don't feel comfortable using the rotary cutter for this, you can just trace it and then just cut it out with scissors. All right, you can get all your little pieces out of the way. All right, so you should have everything all cut. So you're going to have your lining. You're going to have your fusible fleece. You're going to have your body pieces, which are somewhere. There's the body pieces. So these are all cut out. You're going to have 2 pieces for the dorsal fin and 1 piece of the foam, 2 pieces for the actual tail, and 1 piece of foam. So those are all the pieces that are going to be cut. You're going to have a piece. This one here is, this was just used at the end. So this one is about 9 inches, and it's about 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4 inches wide. So this is what I'm going to use to make my hanging tag. I'm just going to fold it, sew it down. This will be tag. This might be a little big. I might have to thin it down a little bit. I'm just using that piece for my hanging tag. And then for my cuff, I went ahead and pre-cut that one. Again, this is one where you don't have to have a cuff, but what you do to determine how big of a cuff you're going to need is you're going to take this piece and you're going to measure it. This one measures 8.5 inches. So if you're going to have a 2-piece cuff, you're going to need 2 pieces, 8.5 inches. If you're going to do where you're not going to have a seam on one side and you're going to be sewing it in, then you're going to cut, I think, a 17-inch piece. You might have to trim it down a little bit because you remember you're losing a 1/2 inch here, but you're not losing that 1/2 inch here. So you might have to make a little bit, maybe more of a 17 inches. Because you're not losing the seam allowance on this side like you do here and here. So, and then how I did that, this one I believe I cut this one at 7 inches so that when it's folded over, it's going to be a cuff that's about that wide. So remember when I was telling you about the registration marks? So if you imagine this is going to be my cuff, it's going to be right here. That's why those registration marks were so important, so that you don't have the fin going to be coming too far up. If I would have had the fin up here, then you wouldn't be able to get the cuff on. So that's just doing this one at 7 inches. So when it's 7 folded in half, it's 3.5. So anyway, you can do your cuff whatever size you want. You can even do the whole thing without having a cuff at all, just like I did with the mermaids. All right, so the next step is ironing. So we got a little bit of ironing that we're going to do. So we're going to go ahead and get set up for that. Okay, so next step is our ironing. So you're going to take I'm going to start with going ahead and getting the body all ready to go. So remember we had cut out 2 pieces of the fusible fleece and we've got our 2 pieces of the body. So you're going to take your fusible fleece, and what I found is easiest, if I just go ahead and that rough bumpy side that's on top, that's the glue. So you want the bumpy side to be on top, and then you're going to take your body piece and it's going to be wrong sides down. So you want the pretty side up. So you're going to lay this on top of that glue side. And you're just going to smooth it all out. It might be not perfect. I'm particularly right here because it changes so much when you're having to cut it or when you're using the rotary cutter. So you're just going to smooth it out as best you can. And then follow the instructions of the product that you're using. This one here I think is like 3 to 5 seconds, and it is not a pressing or ironing. You're actually lifting and pressing down. If your pieces are a little bit bigger than your body piece, you might want to use a piece of parchment paper to keep that glue from getting onto your iron. And I would recommend doing that if you are able to see the foam or the foam or the fusible fleece underneath there. So I'm just pressing this down, making sure it's all secure. If you wanted, you could do some quilting if you want. I think the shark body just looked better if I just kept it nice and smooth. but I'm just getting it all pressed down. So once you get those two done, and I just set those aside, I'm going to start with the fin, dorsal fin. So you've got to look for your piece that's got the glue on the top. So I'm using a single-sided. If you're doing double-sided, you're going to have glue on both sides. But you're not going to be gluing on both sides. You're just going to be gluing first on one side for right now. So this is my glue side. So I'm going to take the piece that's going to be the right coordinating piece, right side up, and I'm laying that on there. Again, follow the instructions of the manufacturer of what you're using. And again, I'm just going to press to secure this, let that glue melt. And here's another tip. Sometimes you get a little wrinkle in here. When you start pressing, that wrinkle is going to just disappear. So just because it's got a wrinkle in it doesn't mean it's not, you can't use it. It will go away. Something about the heat, I think, just smooths it all out. And I'm just giving it a few seconds. Make sure it's all secure, because you're going to be sewing all the way around it. I'm going to go ahead and get that little wrinkle out on this one, because what we're going to do is, the trick is I'm going to take this piece now and I'm going to place it right sides together on top of that. So what we're going to do, once we get that done, you can get some clips or some pins, and I got some clips somewhere, but you're going to clip all the way around or clip it down. If you feel comfortable without worrying about clipping it, you can just sew it all the way around, but what you're going to do is we're going to sew a 1/4 inch all the way around, and when I get to this piece right here, the end, I don't come and pivot, I kind of curve around that. And then I'm going to come back all the way down, and then I'm going to come off right here. And I do back tack here and here, because then we're going to flip it out. And so that's what's going to give it this fin, the way, don't even do that, the way the fin looks. So you're going to flip it out. That's why you're not sewing across the bottom. You're only sewing the sides. So you're going to do that to this one. And now we're going to do the same thing with the shark tail. I'm making sure I got my bumpy side up, which is my glue side. I'm going to take my two pieces, and I'm going to be sure that I'm laying down the one that has the pretty side up. Just lining it all up. And as we did for the dorsal fin, we're just going to do the same thing. Just going to get my iron, and I'm just going to tap it down. And I think I'll be able to show you where that wrinkle just disappears when you hit it with the iron. See, it's barely there now. Touch it. It just disappears. So even if your foam has a little bit of a wrinkle in it, it goes right away. Give this side a press, because this is what's going to be laid on top. And we're going to do this one the exact same way I just showed you for the dorsal. So you've got your two pieces, glue it together, make sure it's, kind of touch it, make sure it's all glued down. And then I'm going to take this piece here, right sides together, and I'm going to lay it right there on top. You can pin it or clip it. These work better with clips. And same thing as what we did for this piece here, but we're going to sew all the way around. I don't come to a point and pivot, I kind of curve around. Do a 1/4 inch all the way around. Come back to here, sew it all the way around. And I like to stop about right here. I just stop right here where this angle is. So I'm starting here. I'm not starting here. I'm starting here. So let me point that out. See where it's kind of bevels over like this? I am actually starting about right here. sew it all the way around, and then I'm stopping right here. I'm leaving this open because same thing, I'm going to clip off some of this bulk at the end. If you want to clip your curves, you can, but I find I didn't need to. And then I'm going to do the same thing. It takes a little bit of time, but I'm going to also turn this right side out, and then we'll have it all ready to go for when we go to attach it to the body. So these two pieces are ready to go. And since we got our iron here, I'm going to go ahead and get my piece ready for my my little hanging tag. And it's just however you want to do your little tag. I trimmed this up a little bit a minute ago. So I'm just folding my two pieces in and then folding it over. It can be wide or as narrow as you want it. And then I'm going to just sew on both sides I'm just going to sew it down one side and down the other. So there's my hanging tag. So that sewing is done. I'm going to go ahead and get my piece that if I'm going to do a cuff. I cut this one at 7 by 17 inches or 17 or a half inches. Just ironing it out. And in my prep work, I'm just folding it in half. Set that aside, and then last but not least, I'm going to get my lining. Just smooth it out a little bit. So pretty much everything else that we're getting ready to do is pretty much going to be at the sewing machine. So I'm going to go over a little bit what we're going to do. So this is my lining. So I'm going to sew all the way around, but I'm going to leave an opening here. But I go ahead and sew all the way around, even on the bottom piece on this one. But I leave an opening because I'm going to show you the one where you're going to have it pulling all the way out. We'll go over that in a minute. So this one here, back tack, sew all the way around, back tack, leave an opening, back tack, get back up to the top, and then set that aside. This piece right here, I'm going to go ahead and sew it right sides together. As I talked about before, the shark fin, dorsal fin, I'm going to go ahead and sew all the way around, leaving this open, back tacking here and here. Tail fin, as we talked about, I'm going to start sewing here, go all the way around, stop here, also flip it out. I'm going to sew my tag here and here. And then the body part, we're going to do that last, because what we're going to do is we're going to sew it, but we got to be sure to place where the fin is going to be. And you got to pay attention to the orientation of where it's going to be, because you want it to be in the right direction of where your tail is going to be. So we'll go over that in a minute. I think we're just going to go ahead and start with our basic sewing of all these other little pieces. All right, so we got all the pieces that I had just done all the ironing over here on, and I've brought them to the sewing machine and I've done some of the sewing. So remember how I had laid the two pieces on top of the piece, well, the single piece on top of the ironed piece. So all I did was I just sewed 1/4 inch all the way around here, making sure that I caught it on both sides. Now, what you can do is you can trim a little of this foam off if you want to trim some of that off. It's not necessary, and I want to be sure to point out that I didn't just come up to this point here and just pivot back. I kind of came up and curved around and then brought it back. It's going to be a little bit easier to work with when you do that. And then I took some of that excess bulk off. I didn't cut it, trim it too close, maybe about 1/8 inch or a little bit more. But that's the piece. So you leave that bottom open, because what you're going to do is you're going to now just flip it out. You can clip your curves if you want to, but I have found that it's not really necessary. Oh, be sure to back tack too at each end, each side, because you're going to put a little strain on there when you're pushing it through. So just kind of take it and just poke it out. Now this is another one of those tools that would be kind of handy to have if you had something that would help you in poking all of your corners out. Kind of got one of these Martelli pencils here, and I'm just going to push it through just to get that point. Now remember, it's not a real sharp point. I kind of curved it around a little bit. Now, this is how it's going to look. It's kind of going to have this look right here. So what you're going to do is I kind of roll it back a little bit, and then I'll take it to my iron because I'm kind of wanting to get my seam as close to being right there on the edge. So I roll it back a little bit, and I roll it on this side, and then I'm going to hit it with the iron, and it's going to relax that, and then it's going to be perfect for when I do my sewing. So I'm going to grab that iron, and I'm going to pop that down. Just stay with me just a minute, and I'll show you what I've done. Okay, so I just hit it with the iron by just doing that little bit of rolling it back to try to get that seam on the very edge here, all along here, and just hitting it with the iron. It relaxes it, so now it's not bowing, and it'll lay a lot thinner. And it's just simple to do. So I did it too. This is the top fin, and then for the tail fin, I went ahead and did that already. So same thing. When I sewed it down, I only started where I had pointed it out early, about a quarter of an inch in, went all the way around, curved it at the points, brought it back in, left this open. I went ahead and did this one because it takes a minute to pop it all the way out. So, and the same thing, I used my little poking tool, or like you could use like a knitting needle to push it all the way out. And it did that same thing. So I rolled it with my fingers to get that seam on the edge, and then I took it to the iron and I just ironed it flat. And we want to have it looking like this. This is what we're looking for. We're going to have a little bit of an opening flap right here, and we want that. So I did that with both of these pieces. If you're going to do a cuff, I took my big piece and I put it right sides together, and all I did was I sewed it a quarter of an inch, maybe a little bit more because I know that it's going to be taking it up a little bit here. So I sewed it, and then I pressed that seam open, and then I folded it in half, lined up all of my edges, and pressed it again so I had nice sharp edges. And you know, as a side note, if you wanted to make something where you could have their name embroidered, do it, this would be, you know, the time to do it would be to figure out, you know, kind of do a fold, figure out where your name's going to be so that you could put, you know, embroider their name. Or you don't even have to do like a sewing. If you want to use puff paints or, you know, or fabric paints or anything that you'd want to do to put their name on here, this would be the time to do it, because this is going to be the bottom and this is going to be hidden in the seam, your raw edges here. Now I went ahead and with my lining, put my pieces together. And this is a kind of a fabric where there really isn't no right or wrong side. So if you're doing right sides together or wrong side, it just doesn't really matter. I just sewed the two pieces together. I sewed all the way around, and on this one, I'm going to sew all the way around the bottom. And then when I come up to the straight edge, I am leaving a good size opening because I'm having to pull all this foam and everything through it. So I got a good size opening that I leave here. And then of course it's open on the top. So that's all done. So now we're at the point, oh, and then here's my little tag. I went ahead and just folded it again, and then I just sewed it on both sides. So I didn't want it quite as wide, so I just went ahead and just give it another fold and sewed it. So this is going to be my little hanger. Now here we're at the construction, or of where I'm going to be starting to assemble to put it all together. So here's my two pieces of the body. So before I flip it right sides together, I've got to figure out where I want my tail and my fin to be. So am I wanting it to be this way? Am I wanting it to be this way? You just want to be sure. To me, it looks better if I have, this is the top, so this would be the top. You don't want to be backwards, so you want to be sure to get it the right direction. And if I'm going to have it like this, so I kind of like it where I have the foam that's going to be on the front side. To me, it just looks a little bit better. So I'm going to have it going this way. So I want it here, here. So I'm not going to be using this tail piece yet. But I also know that the hanger is going to be on the same side as the dorsal fin too. And I also know that now I'm going to be putting a cuff on. I've got to have it down far enough so that I can not have my cuff, you know, my fin be in the way of the cuff. And that's where those registration marks were on the template if you wanted to go ahead and mark that. But that's kind of like a guide because I don't know what size cuff that you're going to be doing. You might do a skinny cuff or you might not do no cuff. But those were just guidelines anyway. So I know that my cuff is at least this wide, so I'm just going to go ahead and bring it down like another 1/2 inch from there. And that's where I'm pretty much wanting my placement to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it, and now I'm going to flip it so it's going to be on the inside. I'm going to go ahead and pull the tail aside because I don't really need that right now. I'm not sewing that in. So now I'm going to have that there, keeping it in that spot right there. And now I'm going to take my other piece, and now I'm going to place it right sides together with that fin, the dorsal fin in the middle there. And since this might be where you might want to use some clips or some pins, so I'm just going to clip it or pin it, clip it right there to hold my dorsal fin in place. Getting all my raw edges together, so it shifted a little bit on me, so I'm going to flip it around so I can see it. I want to line up the raw edges, and I'm lining that up on top, matching up my edges on the top and on the bottom, and now I'm going to pin or clip that piece just a couple of places. I'd like to put a clip at the pin at the other end. Alright, so all I'm going to do now is I'm going to sew all the way around, but I'm not sewing, excuse me, I'm going to take that back. I'm not sewing all the way around. I'm going to sew to this point right here. So I'm going to take a hint from G and Sherry, and I'm going to take one of my red clips, and I'm going to put it right here. That's just going to tell me I'm not sewing all the way around. Just trying to see if I found another red clip, and I don't see another red one, so I'm just going to put a white one here. And then I'm going to put another one right here, because this is going to be tucked inside the tail. Or you might want to have it on the outside. It's up to you on how you want to do it. I leave it open because I might want to have it on the outside. So you could go all the way around and just tuck it in, or you could leave it open. I think the last one I did, I left it open and then I ended up just sewing it inside. So it's up to you. I'm trying to think what maybe I'm going to leave it open, and then we'll play from there. If I want to sew it closed, I can sew it closed. Okay, so I'm going to start here at the top, back tack, go all the way down, stop here at this red, and then I'm going to start back up right here. I'm going to leave this open, and I'm going to come all the way back up and be sure that I catch my the dorsal fin. I have it on a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back tacking at the top. So you are going through some pretty big bulk right here, you know, a lot of thickness. So you might want to use a little bit of a thicker needle. I think I've got a 14 on here. that is completely sewn. So you're going to go ahead and flip it right side out. And your little fin will pop right out. Now I've had where I think I have closed this in completely and I just had it tucked inside, but I've also done some where I've had it on the outside. I think this is going to be one of those ones where I'll just go ahead and just tuck it in and it'll get closed up inside the tail. So one thing that I like to do next is after I get it flipped out, I kind of push out my seams. Give it a good push out. And then take it to the iron and just kind of iron it nice and flat. Relax those seams. All right, see that? All right, so your next step is going to be I think this is last. So the next step is going to be the lining and the cuff. So I'm going to take the cuff now and I'm going to go ahead and place it on the outside here. I'm going to line up this seam here onto the back seam of here. On the back right here. So I'm lining it up right here and I'm going to clip that in place. And it should fit just perfectly on there. Now you could baste this down, just to hold it in place for the next step. I'm just going to put some clips in here. Because the next part is going to be where you're going to be sliding the lining over top so that we can flip it. So I'm just going to do a quick basting stitch all the way around just to hold it in place so I'm not having to fight with it. So I'm going to set it at a pretty good stitch and just holding it in place. And I'm going to probably do like 1/8 of an inch. Just holding it, not back tacking or anything. This is just keeping it in place so I don't have to have, so I'm not fighting it when I go to put the lining on, that it is securely on here. Okay, don't need to tail yet. That's the end. So now I'm going to take this piece right here and we're going to slide it over top. We're going to tuck this in and we're going to bring up this piece and line it up with the top. Now I didn't flip the lining right side. I didn't flip it out. I have it so that when I go to tuck it down inside, that the right side will be on the inside. And then I'm just going to match up the seam here with this one. I'm going to put a clip there. So it's a little fiddly right here. But I'll clip that, and then I'll get the other side and I'll line up the seam and clip that, and then just kind of smooth it all out. Maybe put another clip or two in here just to hold it in place. And I haven't forgotten about the tie. It still has to go on here. So I'm just getting the last clip in here, making sure all of it's smoothed out. Now the side that has the dorsal fin. So it is, figure out where that side is at. That's the side I want to be sure to put. Okay, so the dorsal fin is on this side right here. So I want to put my tie or my hanging tag or my hanging loop, and right here where I've got this red clip, that's where I'm wanting it to go. So take that clip out. I'm going to fold this in half. So I'm going to have my raw edges. I'm dropping down the loop and I'm going to have my raw edges up here on the top. So I've got this where I've put this down in here and I'm trying to keep it right there on the seam. So I've got them together. So you're going to be having some little bulk to be sewn over again. So again, it's good to have a needle that's a little bit thicker to be able to handle going through all of those layers, because I can't even count how many layers that is. So I'm going to go ahead and put a clip there. Now I'm making sure everything is pretty even all the way around. That's why we needed to have that opening on the lining, because we're going to pull all of this through that lining. I know this looks like a lot, but we are nearly almost done, because the last thing is just the tail. And it goes, and it's pretty easy to do. Alright, so I got it clipped all the way around, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch all the way around. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a back tack at the hanger, so at least so it gives it a little bit more extra strength and durability. But you also will be doing a top stitch. Now, if you have one of those great machines that have a removable arm, then you'd be able to slide this under the removable arm. I'm working on the M7, so it's a flatbed. So I'm just going to go ahead and set my machine at 1/4 inch, and I'm going to sew all the way around, being careful that I'm catching all the layers. So I'm coming upon all that thickness that's right here. So I'm just going to take my time to go over that and try to back tack over it too. That is quite a bit. You hear old Bessie hollering there. Okay, here we go. Nice and smooth. And last bit. Okay, so now we're just going to find our opening. Hopefully we did this right. And pull it all the way through. And again, I had done this using that one way that Linda Winter had showed, so be sure to check that out. It's another way if you want to do your cuff. Okay, so then before I go to pop it in, I'm going to go ahead and pull this all the way out. Got to sew that little bit of an opening closed, which was a good size opening because you're pulling all of this through it. So I'm just going to grab it, and I'm just going to give it a tug so it just kind of fold in on itself, and I'm just going to do 1/8 inch seam right there on that edge, kind of give it a finger press so I can see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to sew our opening closed there. It's not going to be seamed because it's going to be on the inside. Just going to do 1/8 inch right there on that edge. nice and closed in. So now we're just going to go ahead and take this piece and just shove it down in there. So what this did was you have no hidden, you don't have a seam here. So I've done this one. I think the one up there where I had just done it where I have a seam that's underneath but it's not seen. So there's so many different ways to do a cuff, and all you have to do is just go online and just kind of YouTube and Stockings, and you'll see different ways that cuffs are done. So what I like to do is I'm rolling this back with my fingers, and I'm putting that seam up on top, and I'm putting a clip in there. You can take this to the iron too and clip it, but I would like to do a top stitch. So I'm just kind of rolling it back, because I'll put a top stitch all the way around the top so that it will stay in place. Now another thing I didn't do is I didn't push the lining all the way down to the bottom because we have that tail to do yet. So, but that's a different thread, so I'm going to go ahead and get this top stitch on real quick. And sew that around. Again, we're getting ready to go through a bunch of layers, so that kind of worries me. I might just not go there. So I'm going to start probably on the other side of that. I just don't feel comfortable hitting that many layers right there, even though they say this machine can take it. I'm going to start it right there beside it, and I'm going to do a good size, probably a 3, and I'm going to probably do about 1/8 of an inch. Back tap a little bit. It's my fault that it's so thick, because instead of just making my strap thinner, I went ahead and just folded it again, not thinking that my going to make my strap too thick. So if I would have just not had done that, we just had a thinner strip, as many layers, it would not have been so thick right there. Almost to where I want to stop. Try it, but I don't think it'll work. It's just going to be too much. Okay, so we've got the top stitching down. Now for the fun part. So now we're going to take the tail, and we're going to be, so there's 2 ways that you could have done this. If you would have wanted, you could have had an original, now I want, hold on a second. Did you see how the lining was peeking through there? We don't want that there. So we're going to pull that lining up, because we don't want to be sewing on that lining. Because what we're going to be doing now is getting this attached. So when I first did it, I had done it where this was overlapping like that, and I had this closed in more. So what I found is easier to do is to take this piece and just tuck it inside. Do you see that? So I'm just tucking it in. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a single stitch from here all the way around. And what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to see if it's caught it on the back side. And then I'm going to come on this. If it hasn't, then I'm going to go over it on the back side. So that's going to give me a guide, because the final step is going to be a zigzag that's going to be zigzagged and caught on both sides. So I'll be between those 2 stitches. So it's kind of hunkered down in there. So be sure to have your tail going in the right orientation as your dorsal fin. You don't want to have it upside down. That just don't look right to me. I mean, it's your preference. If you want it to look like that, I suppose so. But I had it going like this. Right, so I'm just kind of holding it all in there and making sure that it's tucked in on the other side. It's going to look a little different because you got the foam. So I'm just looking for that look right there. I'm going to go ahead and change my thread out to I didn't bring the right gray that I had, but I'm going to, I found something I think that'll look just as cute. And we're going to just do our first stitch, and it's not even a zigzag, I'm just doing a simple stitch to kind of see how it's, that it's holding it all in place. And then I'll flip it to the other side to see if it caught. If it didn't, then I do another stitch, and then that's kind of like the guide for me for where I'm looking to do for my zigzag. Because I'll do a pretty wide zigzag at that point. So I'm just carefully picking it up. And I'm going to sew right here along the edge. I mean right there at the edge. It's just a simple stitch here to here. Then I'm going to flip it over and see how it looks. We're going to change the bobbin thread too. I forgot to change the bobbin. I got the bobbin in the right color too. So, get that changed. I found it was prettier to have maybe like a little bit of a darker tone, but we're going to see how this lighter one looks. Okay, go back to where we were, just a simple stitch right there on the very edge. Alright, so I've got it on this side, so now I'm looking on the back side to see, okay, so I see where I've missed it, so I'm going to do the back side, and that's going to give me a little bit of a guide. I'm going to be right there on that edge, and I'll see where my zigzag is going to go. So do you see it? So now it looks like I got a double row of stitches. So now I know I'm zigzagging pretty much right there in between that double row of stitches. I saw something over here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to see how the foam has kind of popped out a little bit. So I'm just going to, before I start doing all that sewing, I'm going to try to trim away some of this. I'm hoping that it will all be hidden underneath the stitching. If you see some of your foam popping out, then just go ahead and just trim it if you can without cutting your stitches. Alright, so now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set my machine on a wide zigzag. And I'm going to probably have it like at a 6. And I'm bringing my stitch length pretty close. So I think I've got it at an 80. At least that's what I have it here. And I might be doing a couple passes on this. Just so that you know, you're really at the end. This is like the last step besides doing a quick ironing. So I'm trying to be sure that I'm sewing in between those 2 rows of stitches. So I did the one pass this way. It doesn't look too bad, but I liked it for it to be a little bit thicker. So I'm going to go back over it again, but I'm going to flip it over. And sew it again. And I want it to be a little bit denser, so I'm going to bring my stitching in a little bit more. So this one I'm sewing it at 6.2, 6.3, and I've got my stitching length at about 0.60, so it's going to be tight. And I'm going to start again at this very edge and sew all the way through. And you know, I'm using, I think, a cotton blend thread right now, but these look really cool as an accent if you was to do something that's got a little bit more shine to it, like a poly or maybe a rayon, and it gives it a little shine, just kind of a decorative edge to it. Okay, so then just clip your threads. That's all you got to do left. Trim it up a little bit. And you pretty much are finished. What I would do next would be, I would maybe take it to the iron and, you know, maybe pull out your lining and give this a good press. I think I'll do that right now. All right, so I got her all pressed, and this is it. She's all finished. Turned out pretty good. I'm happy with it. Wish this was a little bit of a different color right here, but so that's how easy it is to make the shark. This is really one of those projects that can be done, you can make a bunch of them in an afternoon. And if you're not familiar with working with the fleece or with the fusible foam, this is one of those great projects to get you started. So, because you're only working with a little bit. Now, I want to go over a little bit about the bass, and what makes it a little bit different is it is pretty much designed the same as doing the shark, as how the application is. But what I had done different was when I had after I had sewn my two pieces together, and then I had flipped it out like I had done here, and I had that raw edge that was on the bottom. So I just took it to the machine and I just did some straight stitching right there. So that's what gives it that look of that fin on the top. And then I did the same thing with the shark with this, but I did not do this piece until after I had sewn on this piece, after I had sewn it on. So it was the last thing I had done on the tail, because when I did this one, I actually had the outer piece on the outside of the tail, but I think I like it better if I just tuck it in and then do that. It's just easier to just go ahead and sew all the way around and just tuck it in. So this one, the tail is a little bit different shape. It's got more of a curve like a fish tail, like a normal fish tail is. And then after I had sewn it, I had just kind of hid my stitches into here and just kind of let my machine just go as I did those stitches right there. So that's how that one, and you can see when doing that, when you're working with the foam, it just gives it a really cool definition right there. So that's how I did that one. And then the mermaid is done pretty much like that also. But I also did the mermaid tail, the ending on the mermaid tail, again, after I had already sewed it onto here. I just hid my stitch up into this zigzag. And now you could trace it with a pencil, but I just kind of free formed it. I knew where I kind of wanted it to go, and so I just did this stitching, and it gave it this look right here, like for the mermaid tail. So that was pretty much, it just looks more complicated than what it is. It's really quite easy to do. And then if you do this little pearl, this was just a circle that I had my name, you know, embroidered on, and then cut it out and sewed it together. And then, you know, the mermaid can be embellished in so many different ways. I've seen beads and garlands and shells and all kinds of things that you could do to decorate the Little Mermaid. I didn't design it where I don't think a cuff, I tried several ways to get a cuff on here, it just didn't work. So it was better to just embellish it with whatever you would want to be. So those are the specialty templates. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. If you have any questions, you can still always email me at quiltingwithlisa@gmail.com. Be sure to check out our website, martellinotions.com, and pick up any of these templates. They're all going to be there available for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful day. Have a great holiday season. Bye-bye.